Good morning. The Apostle John has a vision of heaven. He hears God say this: I am the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end, the one who is and who was and who is to come, the Almighty. Notre Dame had a great football victory last night. Each year at the beginning of the season, they put out a new shirt with a kind of theme, a message for the season. They just call it The Shirt. My senior year of college, they put out a shirt that said Notre Dame football on the front, had a picture of the front of the stadium on the front, the back of the stadium on the back. They were doing some renovations, so they could put in an ugly Jumbotron. And it said Notre Dame football, and on the back it said, then, now, forever. No, that's God, who was in the beginning. There was no stadium in the beginning. Right? There's a stadium right now, but football dynasties, we don't know yet if they last forever. Football hasn't been around for very long. Right? But there are things that last. So we might, just from the vantage point of Jesus' time, consider him then, in the past, and now, and what it means that he is the king who is to come. So first, the king who was. We hear first from the book of the prophet Daniel, this amazing 7th chapter. You might remember Jesus quoted it last week when he speaks about himself. I saw one like a son of man coming on the clouds of heaven. He reaches the Ancient One in this procession. He reaches the Father, and the Father gives him authority. But what's authority? Just break down the word. The authority is an author. He's the one who writes a story and gives meaning. So we might just ask, who's the author of my life? What's my story? Who's the main character? Is this a story I'm trying to write mostly for myself? Where does the story end? The king who is. Jesus stands before Pilate. Pilate is there in judgment over God. Jesus stands there stripped, beaten, with a crown of thorns on his head, and you can imagine Pilate, maybe even with some scorn, asking, are you the king of the Jews? They've been waiting all this time, and that's it. We receive so many messages about what our life is for, what's important. Some of them are true. A lot of them are distractions. Jesus, who is God, states to Pilate the mission of his life. He says, for this I was born, and for this I came into the world, to testify to the truth. What would it look like for that to be our mission in life? A lot of times we know how to testify to our opinion. We're good at saying that, maybe. What would it mean to testify to the truth? In great things and in small things. And then there's the king who is to come. Jesus says to Pilate that his kingdom is not of this world. It doesn't have the standards that we have in this world. It doesn't work the way a kingdom does in this world. But there are people who, living now, start to become citizens of that world, of that kingdom. That's what we're meant to be and what we're meant to become. We call them the saints. Yesterday, the church celebrated a Mexican saint named Miguel Agustin Pro. He was born in the late 1800s in Mexico. He was a really smart guy, but just never got good grades in school. He loved pulling pranks, but his parents could tell he was really talented, so his dad had him work at his business for a while. It turned out he had a really good memory. He was really good at remembering details related to the business. But he had a crisis of faith when he was in high school and stopped going to church with his family. He eventually decided that he was going to at least discern a call to become a priest by entering the Jesuits. And it was around that time that he entered the Jesuits that a revolutionary government took over in Mexico. A lot of people don't know about this. It's a whole fascinating story. In 1917, the Mexican Constitution was rewritten by this new government. It outlawed public worship. It prohibited churches, or the Catholic Church, from educating kids. And it said that priests and religious couldn't wear any garb that identified them as priests or religious in public. So eventually he and his fellow seminarians had to flee and finish their formation in California, where he picked up some American slang. And then he came back to Mexico, but wasn't able to minister publicly as a priest. So he heard confessions and celebrated Mass and gave talks about the faith secretly. He would dress up just in regular plain clothes, and he set up these kind of communion stations around different cities. People would know where he was going to be. He would stand there and just looked like somebody who was standing on the street corner, but one person after another would come up to him at different times, and he would quietly, secretly give them communion. About 300 people every day. At some point, he wanted to go into a house where there was a family that wanted to receive the sacraments, but there was a policeman guarding the house. So he dressed up as a policeman and flashed a fake badge at the guy and just walked into the house, gave the person the sacraments, and left. He was arrested a couple of different times for different reasons, but each time they arrested him, they never realized that he was a priest. Eventually, he was arrested on false charges and was sentenced to die. That day, he asked for 2 minutes just to kneel down to pray. So he knelt down and prayed, and when he did finish, he stood up, and with a rosary in one hand and a crucifix in his other hand, he stretched his arms out, and he said, "Viva Cristo Rey! Long live Christ the King." Now, there were journalists there who wanted a good story, so they took a picture of this. The government publicized the photo afterwards to try to deter people, to show them, this is what's going to happen to you if you stand up. Instead, what happened is people came to love this picture. People cherished it. And other people who were imprisoned and sentenced later, they would carry this picture with them. You can look it up and see it. They would hold it close to them. And when they died, they started saying that too. Viva Cristo Rey. We have a privilege and a duty to be able to testify to the truth. We can practice. We can start now, just when we come to Mass. Right? We kneel down during Mass. We don't just kneel down because, I don't know, we needed something to do or we had to find something to do with the kneelers. We kneel because during the Eucharistic prayer, we're in the presence of a king. We say amen when we receive the Eucharist because amen is a way of saying, yes, this is true. We testify to the truth that he is here and he is a king. Then and now and forever.